course, the topic today is about the National Students Entrepreneurship Summit. And I'm delighted again to be invited. Not often, you're right, do I accept invitations, mainly because there are a lot of them. There are many invitations to do various things, but as we were mentioning before, I see myself in you. I was an economist, an economics student, and I think when I was at the University of Nairobi, we didn't have the Economics Association. There were other associations, but definitely not sort of professional in this way. So I think you are several steps ahead of where I was. So in some sense, yes, you are much better off than we are. And we are talking about this, your generation being much better equipped in many ways, not just the internet and all these other things, but in many things. I mean, today you can search for information around the world. In the past, if you wanted to go to get some information, you'd have to go to a library and figure out, you know, for instance, if you wanted to find the particular book, you could only find it in the library. Now you have e-books, etc. But we'll talk more about that, more towards the end of my remarks. And also, I've been told that at the end of my remarks, there'll be some Q&A, and I look forward to answering whatever questions you may have. But in terms of the specific comments, we are definitely meeting at a critical time for the world economy, because we are going through a very challenging period. I've been in the profession now maybe, 40 years, and there's never been a time as challenging as today, the last few years. Of course, we have had the Russian-Ukrainian war, which started almost exactly a year ago. And it has had far-reaching consequences on a lot of our other economies, including Kenya, other African economies, but really around the world. For instance, in the advanced economies, their target for inflation has always been around 2%. And I remember one student like you thinking about the US inflation, 2%. Yeah, well, ours was surging, 20%, etc. This is back in the 90s. Now theirs is actually around 8%, 9%, and ours is a little lower than theirs. So something has gone wrong with the world, and they have to deal with that problem because them, as much as us as well, are not used to the space of high inflation. And high inflation obviously has significant negative consequences. So there are things that maybe in the past they have not been, they have not contemplated, and today they have to deal with that. There are other issues as well. We just came out of the COVID pandemic, and this also has led to significant changes in the way we do business, the way we interact, the way business operate. Think about, for instance, the impact on supply chains. So in the past, you could order things to be delivered on time. Now you have to think about that. You want to bring the supply chains closer to you so that you do not, in a sense, get caught without the supplies that you need to make your outputs. So the world has changed. In 5 short years, the world has changed. In some sense, there is a quote that goes along the lines that it takes a while, it comes a time when it takes ages for anything to happen. And then it takes a few days for ages to happen. I think we're in that space where we are taking a few days for significant changes to happen. So during your lifetime, I'm talking in the last 25 years, our country has been buffeted by all these shocks, ranging from the global financial crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, and indeed also climate change. These have adversely affected us, and the outcomes also of economic growth, inflation, etc. I mentioned the supply chains, I mentioned inflation in the advanced economies and indeed ours as well. Now, back in 2008, the Kenya Vision 2030 was launched. And this Vision 2030 is Kenya's long-term development blueprint for, and I quote, transforming Kenya into a newly industrialized middle-income country. It envisages a high quality of life for its citizens, that's Kenyans, in a clean and secure environment, end quote. 1.5 decades later, time is ripe to assess the progress towards the realization of this vision. This will enable us to appreciate the successes, challenges, and lessons learned, and the way forward. Of course, I can only touch on it, but I presume those in the room, there are many questions that come up. And you know, if you are thinking of term papers, if you are thinking of even your dissertations, etc., theses, there's a lot of information that can allow you to sort of make better assessments of where we are with regard to aspects of Vision 2030, or for that matter, the overall vision. So notwithstanding the challenges that I mentioned, the economy has continued to exhibit remarkable resilience. For instance, following the interventions, the government's interventions in the economy recovered. That's in the context of COVID-19. The economy recovered strongly from the adverse impact of the pandemic and grew by 7.5% in 2021. 7.5%. From a contraction of 0.3% in 2020, largely driven by robust performance in the services sector. Now we asked ourselves, 0.3 contraction in 2020, which was the beginning of the first COVID year, if you may. Actually, that was a pretty remarkable growth, or not a large contraction, because other countries actually contracted by even double digits. So in some sense, we actually managed to, let's say, rescue our economy, because it only contracted by 0.3%. And then, okay, the next year, 2021, rebounded by 7.5%. So it is this resilience, Kenya's resilience, that has actually continued to support, or is supported by a vibrant private sector. So if you ask yourself, what are the sources of our resilience? Why were we so resilient? First is this vibrant private sector. Then it is our diversification. We are highly diversified. Our economies are highly diversified. Also, we are regional, and we are integrated regionally. That is, we are a regional hub, if you may. And another element which is very important is the very highly educated and youthful population. All these are factors that you may say are the sources of Kenya's resilience. So Vision 2030 has been useful in guiding Kenya's economic development, and we have mentioned some notable achievements. It has helped to support macroeconomic stability and also economic transformation. So as a result, Kenya transitioned to lower middle income country status in 2014. So in 2014, Kenya actually became a middle income country, lower middle income. Now, I leave it to you to figure out, you can Google it if you want, what do you mean by a middle income country? Actually, this is a classification by the World Bank, and according to the gross national income, if it falls in a certain range, then you're a middle income country. So we are in that category, but more to the lower side of that, so the lower end of this middle income range. And we transitioned there in 2014. There's also been notable improvements in economic management, infrastructure, social capital, things like health, education, and importantly, technological innovations. Other benefits include devolution, which has led to decentralization of power, resources, and representation at the local level. This, by the way, is a significant item that I think we need a lot more research on, the benefits of devolution. And I think, Governor, you can talk about it. You are very much in this space. But I think we need also solid examples of and solid research around this topic. So, rather than talk generally about all these topics, I would like to highlight some successes in the financial sector. Financial sector development plays an important role in promoting socio-economic development. So the Vision 2030's aspiration for the sector is to create, and I quote this, to create a vibrant and globally competitive financial sector, promoting high levels of savings and financing for Kenya's investment needs. And actually, I have often gone back to this aspiration and asked myself, well, are we there yet? Have we actually achieved this aspiration? And I don't know. Again, we need people like you to ask that question with data. My sense is we are not there. We've achieved some things, actually overachieved in particular areas, what we've done in innovation, etc. But in terms of savings for investments, we are still on that journey. So in line with this, policies have been geared towards increasing financial access through increased outreach. Furthermore, the regulatory and policy initiatives undertaken have provided an enabling environment for financial innovations. And we can talk lightly about financial inclusion, but this is significant. Kenya now, 2 years ago, we estimated or we measured, we did a survey on financial inclusion, and 83% of adults are included in the financial sector. In 2007, we only had 26% of adults included in the financial sector, financially included. That change is significant. And you ask, well, okay, fine, what does it mean? Well, it means that there are a whole bunch of people that were completely excluded from the financial sector, and therefore the benefits that come with financial sector. You are included in the financial sector, even though you probably do not have a bank account. Most of you, actually all of you have we call it an M-Pesa wallet. Yeah? So you're included in some ways. But I think also it's not just access. You actually you transact in many ways, not just payments. You buy insurance, you invest in particular things, all because you actually have become included in the financial sector. So that sort of success, we can minimize it, but it is extremely important. It wasn't, in some sense, fleshed out in Vision 2030, but I think we have overachieved it. And that's why I'm saying there are some areas where we've done very well, remarkably well. Others, not so. So, I want to highlight a few areas, a few elements of the successes, if you may, in the financial sector. When you talk the financial sector, of course, you are talking the banking sector because the banking sector is dominant. So it has had to deal with many difficulties, but has emerged stable and vibrant. So for instance, the branch network in the country, this increased from 512 branches in 2003, so 20 years ago, we only had 512 branches, to the current 1,500. So almost threefold. And over 78,000 agents. Just think of that, 78,000 agents. And you do understand we got into this agent banking sort of arrangement, framework. So you don't have a full branch, but you have agents of branches or banks serving customers, deep huko mashinani, in the corners of in the depths, let's say, of our country. Also other things, the sector's assets crossed the 6 trillion mark, Kenya shillings that is, at the end of 2021, with over 66 million deposit accounts and over 13 million loan accounts. Now let me tell you a secret. Years ago, more than 25 years ago, if you asked a banker, how many bankable Kenyans are there? With your experience as a banker, how many bankable Kenyans are there? None of them could have told you more than 1 million. There were less, according to their estimate, there are less than 1 million bankable Kenyans. And that is the estimate. Now we have, as we have said, we have more than 66 million deposit accounts and over 13 million loan accounts. And all these are representing humans or yourselves or let's say bankable people. So somehow we've changed the model of banking. So in your jargon, you could say the song has changed. And so the dance had to change. And I think there's no better place to look at that, the evolution, than in the banking space, given the numbers that I just gave you. Secondly, the banking sector has positioned Kenya as the premier financial services hub in Eastern Africa. And that you see, Kenyan banks have spread their wings across East and Central Africa. Currently, 8 Kenyan banks have presence in the other 6 East African community countries, including, of course, the DRC that joined the EAC, the East African community, just recently. So the subsidiaries of Kenyan banks in the EAC at end 2021 had 494 branches and over 8,000 employees and an asset base of about 1.2 trillion. So Kenyan banks are therefore playing a significant role in supporting regional economic integration across the country. Thirdly, Kenya has become the leading regional hub for financial innovation. The introduction of mobile-based financial services that started with the mobile money transfer services that not only transformed the financial landscape, but it was also a game changer. As I said, the percentage of adult population who have access to formal financial services has increased tremendously from 26.7% in 2016 to 83.7% in 2021. Innovation is key in this, and innovative payment systems have significantly enhanced efficiency in the payments, clearing, and settlement systems. These have lowered transactional costs and promoted businesses and trade. Fintechs have permeated various spheres of the economy, including credit markets, banking, investment, insurance, savings, health, education, agriculture, etc. And there are significant efficiency gains and benefits to households, businesses, and the overall economy. Despite the significant progress that I mentioned that has been made towards realizing Vision 2030, there's a lot more work that needs to be done. It is not entirely satisfactory in a sense if you look at it like a scorecard. It is evident that the economic growth has failed to lift the livelihoods and economic aspirations of the poor and middle class. Gaping inequalities abound. In common with other countries around the world, we have also lost ground during the pandemic with regard to the majority of the so-called SDGs. These are the Sustainable Development Goals. You can also check what the Sustainable Development Goals relate to, but these were adopted by the United Nations back in 2015 as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that by 2030, all people enjoy peace and prosperity. But as it turns out, during COVID, most countries have reported retrogression, meaning they have lost ground with regard to their successes in health, successes in education, etc. Further, availability of food is critical in the wider region that we are in, that is the region of the Horn of Africa, where famine is imminent and millions more are staring at hunger. The United Nations has warned of a global emergency of unprecedented magnitude, with millions at risk of starvation. So this is important. And a related component is, of course, the need to address climate change and accelerate the transition to a low-carbon, climate-resilient global economy. We certainly have work to do. So, while Vision 2030 continues to guide our long-term development path and aspirations, the operating environment has changed dramatically and become more challenging and uncertain. The realization of our development goals is now facing many challenges: climate change, scarcity of resources, geopolitical tensions, conflicts, etc. So despite the headwinds, it is important to forge forward by leveraging the progress that we've made and achievements made so far. I will outline below a few of the key ingredients. The first of this is the critical need to create more opportunities for the youth, that is, for yourselves. This we need to do in order to reap the so-called demographic dividend. As economists, all of you, I'm sure you've had these conversations about what happens when the population continues to grow. And if you can actually get the population, the youth, to be employed in particular ways with productive employment, etc., production will increase, and that is part of the so-called demographic dividend. And it has happened across countries, and then other things begin to crop up later. We can discuss that later. But now we are staring at this, the so-called youth bulge. Now it's coming through. So the question is, are we going to have you in productive environments, providing you with those opportunities, and therefore provide production opportunities for you, and indeed thereby expand the economy? it's not a foregone conclusion that those opportunities will arise. And that is the issue we have as policymakers, that we need to provide those opportunities today, not tomorrow. This could be achieved by leveraging technological innovations and continued investment in digitization of the economy. Now, yourselves being a generation of tech-savvy individuals, this is an area where your role and contribution to the realization of the development aspirations of this country is equally critical. In addition, there are enormous opportunities provided through global and regional integration initiatives such as the African Continental Free Trade Area, the East African Community I mentioned, KESA, etc. For instance, with a population of 1.2 billion, the African Continental Free Trade Area has the opportunity to create the world's largest free trade area with expanded markets for goods and services. And this would be, besides merchandise trade, also we need to identify and prioritize services, including business, financial, communication, and tourism. Globalization should be your friend, and it will work for you if you are ready for the opportunities that it provides. The second of this is the urgency of maintaining macroeconomic stability. This is something that I think, talking to you now, it doesn't take much to understand. But when I'm talking, let's say, to parliamentarians, I have to do more work to explain the importance of macro stability. So it is important. If you think, for instance, macro stability from the context of what? Inflation. We all know the people that are hurt the most by inflation are the poorest. The people that have the least means are the ones that are affected the most. So that's just one in terms of macro stability. But macro stability isn't just inflation, it's everything else. Yeah? And in this context, we in the central bank have a responsibility, the mandate on price stability. And we know we do it also with working hand in hand with, let's say, the fiscal authorities, that's the government, right, achieving the objectives. When you think, for instance, about food security, that really is something that the government is more in charge of, not us in the central bank. And as you can imagine, that supply constraints with regard to food obviously can end up driving inflation. We should also keep under review the fiscal targets and outcomes in addition to the potential risks from state-owned enterprises. All that would lead to maintaining macro stability in the economy. Third and last of this, there's a need to build resilience to climate change, which continue to have far-reaching effects on economic activities and livelihood. I don't want to say much about this because unfortunately there has been a lot of politicization of this issue, but the facts are there. The facts are there. I mean, scientifically, this is something that is upon us, and we have to reverse it by actions that we take collectively and individually. So it calls for urgent action, but I think it also calls for urgency to invest in innovative, adaptive, and mitigation initiatives to address these climate change challenges. From our perspective as a regulator, we recently issued guidelines to commercial banks so as they can think through this climate change issue and make it, let's say, make it part of their regular business, the way their 24/7 business. And I think we have to think the same way. We cannot have climate change as a sort of a separate entity. Yeah? It has to be mainlined You know, it has to be part of everything that you do. And I noticed that today the first thing we did is to plant some trees. And that's excellent. There are only 3 trees we planted, but it is something that needs to be repeated over and over again, and eventually we'll have millions, we'll have billions of trees that will obviously begin to reverse the climate change issue. So, I'm about to finish. All these issues relate to the hardware, if you may. That is the environment, the space that you work, etc. It is our collective responsibility to make sure that all these critical elements are put in place as soon as possible. There's no time to waste, and certainly no room for hubris. But what about you? How do you prepare? How do you prepare yourself for this brave new world? That's the software. So, how do you prepare yourself? Dear students, believe in yourself. You are unique and have unique qualities that need to be deployed. Each of you is unique. Be patient. This is a big one. Be patient. And I think I'm number 1 on that. You need to tell me many times, be patient, Governor, be patient. And I repeat that to you, be patient. Be patient. It takes steady work, persistence, many failures, and a few successes to know where your strengths are. There's a book, The Practice of Groundedness, by Brad Stulberg, and he advises you, and I quote this, to approach every endeavor deliberately, with care and with intention to continually grow. It requires paying attention to the feedback you receive both internally and from external sources you trust, and adjusting accordingly. And importantly, Eliud Kipchoge, you all know him, reminds us that running is not so much about the legs. It is about the heart and mind. So, I want to conclude, but before I conclude, I have some good news for you, which is, some of you are already aware of this, which is the Central Bank of Kenya runs every 6 months an internship program. Every year, every 6 months. And many of you may be interested in this. It's very competitive, but I urge you to compete with all the other Kenyans that are at your stage. The applications are available, they are always available on our website, careers website. Everything appears there. There's no sort of back channel or anything else. So everything is there. I invite you to acquaint yourself with the information on our website, not only about our career, about these internships when they are available, but also other information that you can find relevant in the questions that we raised. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm ready now for your questions.
Thank you so much, our guest Onyola, our guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gillian Faith Hadisa, and I pass my special recognition to the work that the KESA, Kenya Economic Students Association, is doing to ensure that our students are well mentored, and as they're getting out, they're well prepared. And my question to you, our chief guest today, is One of the main objectives on manufacturing, according to Kenya Vision 2030, is to strengthen the capacity and the local content of domestically manufactured goods. But the current conditions or trend to start up a business in Kenya is punitive. They say investors are building malls and not manufacturing plants. What do you suggest is the best way to boost the investor confidence in our current circumstance? Thank you so much.
Okay, first of all, various distinguished guests and the students that are in here, good afternoon. My name is Ken, a student from Kenya University.
You're kind of muffled, so... No, we can hear you, but a bit muffled, but that's okay. Maybe he'll help me. Maybe my guy here will help me. But keep going.
Okay, I want to first of all thank you especially for mentioning the various avenues and opportunities where Africa as a continent we can be able to tap into to make sure that Kenya as a growing economy be better placed in the world economic standard. In recognition of today's theme, that is innovation and addition towards Vision 2030. I want to recognize that you mentioned the issue to do with internships, but here my question comes. This auditorium, we have various young scholars and critical thinkers. And my question to you is, does the Central Bank of Kenya welcome policy reforms and recommendations from students? And if these are welcome, how best can these students get to present their ideas to the Central Bank of Kenya? Thank you very much.
Another?
Thank you. My name is Herman Daniel Peshu, a student of CUEA. I really appreciate and I'm honored that we have such an engagement whereby we have so many students and we've been provided with such an opportunity. And proceeding to my question, in regards to the theme of the day, could you be willing to guide us or rather advise us on how a young graduate can ensure that they grab opportunities such as to reach a level such as yourself? And if you were to go back to school today, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Okay, maybe I handle those just now before I forget. Thank you, I had you. So, the first question, I think it was Lorna, the issue of investor confidence. That's really the bottom line of your question. This is important, but I think we need to begin, maybe I want to address it a little differently from how maybe you've had others respond. Who do you have in mind when you say investor? Who is the investor? Often we think it is some sort of external, man or whoever it is, somebody from out there, yeah? And they're the ones that are investing in Kenya. What about you? What about we? So when you talk about investors, actually you need to think first and foremost about domestic investors, ourselves. I'm doing some savings and I'm investing in particular things. It is true, you also have the foreign investors that come in. Maybe they're running large manufacturing outfits, maybe they're doing other things. But I think for the most part, we need to begin by looking at ourselves. Look left, look right. Yeah, those are the investors that, by excellence, at least at the beginning. So yes, we need to instill confidence so that they can actually invest. And I think the issues are twofold. One is, maybe more, but I'll just mention two in the interest of time. First is this thing of having macro stability. Macro stability really helps in providing a sense of confidence. So you can say, for instance, think of, think of a bus. You're riding in this bus from one place to another, and you need confidence in the driver. And if he's been doing it well, and he's always doing that job well, you actually have a lot of confidence. You will step in the bus and you worry too much about the journey. He'll deal with things as they come up. So I think the first thing is economic management has to be well done. In the jargon, you talk about the risk premium. Yeah? So the risk premium will be lower if indeed you have if indeed you have better economic management. So this is why we struggle. One of the reasons why we struggle to bring down inflation is one of the reasons why, for instance, the government struggles to bring its deficit under control. This is why one of the reasons that they try to bring debt down. It takes time, but the trajectory. So that is number one in terms of investor confidence. The second one is clarity of rules. That the rules are clear and they don't change. Or if they change, they only change gradually. Why? An investor is thinking, let's say 10 years, 20 years. If you want the investor to think over 3 years, then the investor will have to have huge returns. Yeah. 20, 30% return. That is crazy. So in effect, for the investor to be there long term, then there has to be a certain sense of confidence that the rules are not changing dramatically. So for instance, think about rules on ownership, rules on taxation, rules about all these things that we hear about. So you think of it as the business environment, that the business environment is conducive and the rules are not changing. Finally, I said two, but there's a third one maybe I should throw at you now. It's sort of generally the cost of doing business. So think about clarity about that, but also the cost. So for instance, how many licenses do you need to get to, to open a business or whatever else it is? Are you sure those are the number of licenses that are there? So this clarity is so important. Those to me are the three fundamental things in terms of bringing down investor, or rather raising investor confidence and bringing down what you may call as the risk premium. On the issue raised back there about how students could intervene and provide their ideas, we are very open to that. Then, how does it work? There are many things. For instance, we put out a paper recently on CBDCs. I hope you all know what CBDCs are. That's central bank digital currencies. So we are thinking about it as the Central Bank of Kenya. If there's anybody in Kenya who's thinking about it, it has to be the central bank. So we wrote a paper and said, hey, tell us what you think. Give us your views. It was public. It was on our website. And we asked for views, and we got a lot of views. We got like 1,000 views. Views or responses. I don't know, if any of you sent your comments. But I think there is a certain, let's say, rhythm of some of those things. And we request comments for those things, and it is upon you to sort of take up the challenge. So I'm turning it around. Be on top of the things that are happening in our spaces and make your views known. Yeah? What we don't do as a central bank, we don't sort of go and fight in the press, or other things like that. We are not. And yeah, you see a lot of negative news by various newspapers, and we don't always go after them. We don't go fighting them. Meaning we don't want to have those discussions out there in public domain. So I again encourage you to make your views known. Now, if you have a view about something, you can also write. Well, there's an email address that you can send it to about any idea, anything that you think about. We are, in a sense, believe that you may have good ideas that we could pick up on, or questions or things. One of the things I've done is to actually try and understand better how the economy works. Now, I don't know if you understand very well how the economy works. I don't. And I'm somewhat a student like you. So I want to learn, and every day I want to learn more about it. So some time ago I went to Gikomba and other places, and toured the place just to, and talk to some of the people that are there. And I learned a lot. So don't let anybody tell you you're a student, you don't know much, or you're a student, your views are not needed. That's not true. Send your views, but also look at the things that we are putting out. The government, for instance, just put out, the National Treasury just put out a budget statement, yeah, for the supplementary budget. It's on their website. They've asked for comments. You know, feel free to make comments on those things, individually and collectively. You don't have to all do it together. Do it individually. So, thank you very much. Then the question about what would I say? Well, to a young graduate, well, I think the last part of what I said in my comments covers a lot of that. And really, to me, this is answering the question, if I had to do it again, what would I do? I would really focus on those things. But concretely, I think at times we narrowed our field of specialization to a university. Yeah. There are many things. We think that there is only one thing we do well. That's not true. Most of you have multiple strengths. And there are things that are probably, if you're into economics, maybe you're good in math. You should be good in math, if you're into economics. But there are other things. A new language. Why not learn a second language? If I had to go back again, if I were your age, that's what I would have done. And that's a mistake I made very early on when I was in high school. Yeah? I kind of ended up in sciences and math and things like that. And very soon narrowed my field of... You need to do things that are not exactly in your space. Some of you are into... think of yourself as just artists. Well, okay, fine, you're an artist, but you can do other things as well. Don't say math is a problem. So it is important to be well-rounded. So that's really my quick response to you.